So hello, everybody. Welcome. We're still letting a few more people in as we get started, but we're really excited to be with you today and introduce to you a really awesome resource. Dr. Funmi Okunola is here with us, founder of Long COVID, The Answers. Welcome and thanks for being with us, Dr. Okunola.
Oh, thanks for having me, Cara. It's wonderful to see you again. And thank you for giving me a chance to share our resource with the community here today. So yeah, I'm gonna just tell you a bit about my background and why I became a long COVID advocate and set up the resource. Then I'm going to show you through our website and our podcast series. And then I'm willing to take questions. I am a registered family physician in Canada, BC, though I am not licensed to give personal medical information. I can't do personal consultations. Yeah, so I can ask kind of general questions within the best of my ability, but I often find that long haulers know more than I do. I'm learning every day from all of you guys. But yeah, as I say, I can't give any sort of personal and it's not I don't think it's kind of sound for any of you to share your personal medical history on a public forum. It's not really safe for any of you. So I would deter any of you from doing that.
Yeah, so we'll take questions at the end. If you'll hold your questions till the end, and we'll use our usual process where you can type them in the chat. And then also, I want to remind everybody that this will be recorded and shared with you guys on our Still COVIDing YouTube site. So if you like to share it with your friends or anyone who couldn't be here, all of the information that we share today will be available for there to use. So yeah, Dr. Okunola, we would love to hear how you got interested in long COVID. How did this become sort of your passion project?
Well, as you can probably tell, I'm British. So I was born and brought up in England, and did all of my medical training there. And we've got a fantastic healthcare system in the UK called the National Health Service. 96% of people pay nothing for their medication. I mean, God. And the service is largely free at the point of delivery, though they keep removing bits of it. So it's a wonderful service, but it was being really run down and very starved of cash. So I became quite disillusioned, and I wanted to change the scene, change of life. Uh, you know, um, I wanted to also practice in a system that was still free at the point of delivery. I only speak English, unfortunately. I think speaking in one language is like seeing the world in black and white. So all of you that are bilingual are really lucky. And I've worked in all sorts of communities and worked through interpreters before, so I didn't really want that. And I've got elderly parents, so that narrowed it down to Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. And I love the great outdoors, so BC and Canada has that. And Australia and New Zealand's a bit far when you have elderly parents. And, if I had to make a quick flight to Canada, so that narrowed it down to Vancouver, I can't take anything below, I would say, minus 10 degrees. So Vancouver became the best option for me. And it's, a wonderful place to be. So I set up practice in the Lower Mainland and found quite quickly that even though there's a high respect for doctors in Canada, which was kind of dissipating in the UK, same situation here, really. The healthcare system, in a lot of respects, is more fortunate than what you have in America because, people aren't carrying around huge debts because of their health bills, but the pharmaceuticals are not free, and the system has been grossly underfunded. And community physicians, I mean, I started to use my own savings to keep my practice open, because I like to spend time with my patients. I can't, if I have a 90-year-old that comes in with their daughter who's taken half a day at work, I'm not going to say 10 minutes, one problem only. I'm going to spend an hour with them. So you don't make money that way, unfortunately. So yeah, and so I found that I was just in the black for 2 months out of the year, really. So that became non-viable. So I handed over the practice to a colleague. I made sure all of my patients were sorted out and had a care plan, all 1,100 of them, the most complex ones anyway. And, you know, I had ideas of doing other things. Went on holiday to Mexico in January, February, the day after my last day on January the 31st, came back, and we were in the middle of a pandemic. And my partner, who is a director of a care home, they just provided, it was independent living, so they had no medical presence on the care home in the middle of the pandemic, with their oldest resident being 104, who remembered the first pandemic, by the way. The 1918 flu pandemic. She was around at that time. Anyway, so he would just hand the phone to me when his manager would call, you know, in a panic about what do I do? What do I do? So I became their COVID advisor. And at that time, early on in the pandemic, there was about 1,000 papers coming out a month about COVID-19. So I just signed up to all the credible journals and read as much as I could. And I wrote up protocols to keep COVID out for all of the residents. So for the 6 months I was there was no COVID. And so obviously from that, I came to learn about long COVID very early on. I mean, again, I was educated by all of you. And that's what I found with this disease. You know, it's about listening to the patient. It's about bringing a sense of, what's the term, humbleness. I've forgotten the term, so I'm a bit nervous, but you know, and being open to listen and receive. You guys educate me. So it was Body Politic. They had a press conference, and so to alert, you know, everybody to the fact that long COVID was a thing. And so, and anyway, when I was reading my articles about COVID-19, it was being mentioned. And so yeah, so you know, so I did a podcast series about all the, called COVID-19 The Answers, about all the way you could mitigate yourself from catching SARS-CoV-2, because you know, I saw that long COVID was happening. I saw that it was very real. And my fear was, as we were opening up after vaccination, that we were exposing ourselves to a virus that had the ability to cause a mass disabling event, as one long hauler, you know, a term I borrowed from another long hauler. I was frightened that we'd be in a situation where we would be saying, when we were once well. You know, so I wanted to educate people about what we needed to do to keep ourselves safe from the virus. And the message just wasn't getting across on public health. And so my patients were coming into the office and they would say to me, oh, I don't want the vaccination. I'm going to be infertile. I'm going to be irradiated by the 5G. And I'd say, and I'd kind of debunk those myths. And I say, where are you getting it from? And they say, oh, from the internet. And I said, well, it's not, you know, it's rubbish what you're saying. And they'd say, well, where do we go, doc, for information? And I thought, yeah, where do I send them? And so I realized that there wasn't anything online that had credible evidence-based, or very little, that had credible evidence-based information in a form that non-scientific people could understand. And so that became my determination. So initially I did COVID-19 The Answers, and I interviewed people like Professor Jimenez about air filtration and ventilation. I interviewed Michael Minner about rapid testing, a whole range of people, you know, to just get a podcast out there that people could watch and listen to help educate them. And then, you know, and the whole point of doing that was because I knew that if we didn't prevent ourselves from getting infected with SARS-CoV-2, a significant proportion of us would end up with long COVID. And that time, you know, it's petrifying. Some papers were saying anything from 10% to 50% of people would end up with it. I think now we're seeing that there's a hard core of 5 to 10% of the population anywhere that remain with sort of long COVID. We have no idea of how many people have post-acute sequelae of COVID, which is, I think you probably know, but if you don't, it's about the organ and tissue damage you get from the virus without the other MECFS type presentation of long COVID. So we, you know, and we've just seen the tip of it with ZIL Ali's research, double the number of type 2 diabetes since the pandemic, 8 times the risk of children developing type 1 diabetes if they have a genetic preponderance, huge rise in every form of heart issue that there is, and it's not being properly documented. So so yeah, that inspired Long COVID Be Answers, you know. And I thought, you know, how can I get this message out there? How can I educate, you know, my colleagues? Because I still mask. I mask in clinic. I mask everywhere. You know, I do eat out. That's my one salvo. I try and eat outside, you know, but I mask in supermarkets. I mask on planes. I mask at weddings and funerals. People, you know, come and look at me, and my partner says she's a doctor and she's a COVID expert, and people nod their heads and seem to understand. I don't care about the looks that I get. All of my patients, I encourage all of my patients mask, nearly 100%. I provide my own KN95s. And I wear one because the N95s are far too uncomfortable for me to be wearing all day, and the patients, and they give about 99% protection. I've had several patients who were full-blown positive, masked with me in clinic, up close, and I've never caught SARS-CoV-2 from masking. So, and when I talked to my colleagues about it, they just didn't want to hear. I've diagnosed 2 colleagues with long COVID in my office, and they still consult unmasked. So with that level of ignorance in my community, you know, where I felt we should be leading. Not only are we letting and have let down the whole of the long COVID community, we also should be leading the fight and representing you in so that you can find, you know, treatment, cure, and at the least, you know, basic, you know, medical service from us. And it's just not happening because my colleagues are so ignorant. And I watched a video with Professor Rick Arsenault, who's become now one of our on our board of advisors, and he was saying that, you know, medics really need to be educated, and the best way of getting them educated is to give them incentive. So so that really inspired me. So I worked for over a year with the College of Family Physicians of Canada, and now we've put together so far it's a 19 episode, I'm hoping to get up to 30 episode podcast series, which is accredited. So the College of Family Physicians of Canada has affiliations with loads of other medical colleges all over the world, and also specialist medical colleges, and also healthcare professional colleges. So if you're an occupational therapist, you can watch the website and get a certificate for half a main pro credit, which will count towards your licensing. And that's the same if you're a doctor or whatever. So we've devised the podcast series so healthcare professionals have an incentive to learn about long COVID. So as you can see, I feel really passionate about this. You know, it's like I have several theories of why the medical profession is choosing to ignore long COVID. I think there's 2 big parts. Like, for example, in our province, the person who's supposed to lead us, the head of public health, has expressed in the past that she doesn't believe that SARS-CoV-2 is an aerosol virus. She's often presented herself unmasked or with just a cloth mask, and has now put a directive out to say that there's no need for masking in medical settings. And as you know, and often there's this message coming out from public health that it's just like the flu, when we all know that it isn't. So I think when you're not being led from the so-called top person, it's very difficult to carry the message forward. Busy doctors don't have time to read the latest medical, you know, articles. And if, you know, people that they trust that are giving them the directives and leadance and guidance are saying that it's not important, then it's very difficult to go against the grain. And there's me standing there in my mask, the 1 out of 40 doctors, you know, I just look a little bit crazy to them. So so I think that's part of it, but you know, I haven't let that stop me. I try and spread the message as much as I can, and really the aim of doing things like this is to just get the word out there so people know that there's somewhere credible that they can come and where they can send their doctor if they get gaslit. You can just say, go to Long COVID the Answers and have a read of a few things, and then you'll know that this is really real. And then also for, long haulers, mostly, really, one of the things that I was hearing time and time again is that I have to go to over 200 sites, and I found it myself, so the Dysautonomia International website is fantastic, but it's about dysautonomia. I think, the Long COVID Physio website is one of the best because it's a little bit more, it covers more of a wide range of things. And again, Todd Davenport, who's the lead co-educator on that, is one of our advisors. It's a fantastic website. But it still doesn't have everything. So we listen to what you were saying. You want to go to one place. You want the latest research. You want it made into a form that's understandable for you. You want it to be regularly updated. So because if they're really good, because very often the websites are run by volunteers or charitable donations, they run out of money. I think indeed, Cara told me about how this a whole group was initially sponsored, and then the money was no longer there. And thanks to her and the other volunteers working with her, they've dedicated their time and their lives to make this up and running for nothing. But most people can't afford that. We've all got bills to pay. So so we looked for a way, but I think it's really important that education is free. I come from a poor background myself. I was lucky enough to get my medical education for free in the UK. That's now unfortunately ended. So and I come from a community where I had access to free healthcare. There's no such thing as healthcare debt in the UK. So, that's kind of my mindset. So I wanted to keep the information free, and I've benefited from it. I wouldn't have been able to afford to subscribe to hundreds and hundreds of, expensive scientific articles. So during the pandemic, a lot of stuff was made open source. Sadly, now that is being pulled back. I would say about 20% of the papers are now beginning to come out behind a paywall. But back in the day, and still, I mean, the majority is still free to access. I was able to utilize that to educate myself. So I wanted to do the same. So we've devised a way of trying to make it pay without having to charge people for accessing the website anyway. We won't be able to do that for every single service that we will provide in the future, but at the moment, the website will always be free. The podcast series will always be free. We've self-funded it. I'm broke, myself and Joe. I just work 2 days a week of medicine now, and I just about keep myself above my head above water. I'd be drowning if I didn't have a partner. So but I just feel so strongly about this. And I've heard that certain governments want to do what we've tried to achieve, but they've been stuck in committees discussing it. I just wanted to get on with it because you guys are suffering out there. I think we need to raise awareness. I wish that someone famous would stand up and be an advocate for long haulers. But for now, we just all have to do what we can do to raise awareness, to educate the medical public about complex chronic disease. I think long COVID has the possibility of changing the face of medicine. Never in the history of humanity has everybody been exposed to one virus in a time of advanced scientific technology. I mean, we've had epidemics and pandemics going back through millennia, the plague, whatever, but this is the first time ever where we've had a pandemic that's affected the whole world, where we have the ability to scientifically analyze it, provide treatment for it, research for it. So, I was completely ignorant about complex chronic disease until I started to learn about long COVID. Which is, I feel like I've been cheated in medical school, that we were never taught properly about it. But now that it's here and we have 400 million people on Earth probably suffering from long COVID, we can change the way you know, the whole way medicine is practiced and taught, and bring all of complex chronic disease, ME/CFS, fibromyalgia, um, uh, what's the new term that Amy Prohl used? Because I've been told off about calling things post-viral syndromes. So past acute infection syndromes is the terminology. Virtually every, I'm finding that virtually every virus and pathogen has an effect of causing some form of complex chronic disease on a significant proportion of individuals. I had no idea that there was a long HIV and a long Ebola. All of these viruses and certain bacteria are associated with complex chronic disease. And I suspect that we're going to find things like thyroid disease is caused by a virus. I suspect certain other cancers, apart from, you know, cervical cancer, are going to have viruses and bacteria at their root. So it's really going to change the face of medicine. But we don't want to wait 17 years, because at the moment, on average, it takes 17 years for scientific research to be put into practice. You guys are suffering. You don't have 17 years to wait. We need to sort this out yesterday. So yeah, that's what inspires me to do what I'm doing and to get up in the morning and be broke.
You guys can see why I love her, right? Um, you I hear you saying a lot of the things that we say in our communities all the time. And for you guys from the still COVIDing communities, when she was talking about the funding, that was for the survivor core communities and the long hauler communities that we also help moderate, just in case anybody's confused about that. But you have done so much work. I can't believe you kept a nursing home COVID free for 6 months in the middle of a pandemic. That's really amazing. And the thing that really drove me to you and your site and your work is the balance that you've been able to achieve, because we're on the edge of translational research, right? This is stuff that basically we're taking from research, from bench to practice. And that's a very gray area to be in medicine, because we don't have double-blind placebo trials for everything. But like you said, we also don't have time to leave people suffering. And so we have to make our best educated, evidence-based guess for each person in a personalized fashion to be able to bring them back to health. And so I really think you embody that balance. And I love your research background. Again, like you said, most physicians don't spend their time reading journal after journal after journal to stay up on all the trends. They can't, they don't have time, and their hands are busy, actually caring for patients. And so for you to be able to bridge that gap and offer education, it's like you could choose to see patients yourself, but then you can only help the number of patients that you can see. By educating other providers, you are extending your reach and making such a huge impact for our community. And so we really, really appreciate that. Um,
Oh, thank you, Cara.
and with
Thank
all
you.
of that, would you like to show us the website
Yeah, I
and show
would.
us around? The thoughtful features of this website, too, guys, you're going to be blown away. There's like low stem, there's diagrams for people who need it in visual form. I'm really excited for you guys to sort of familiarize yourself with this resource, and it's continually updated. Dr. Okunola is continually adding new articles, new evidence, new citations, new podcasts, and so it really is an ongoing labor of love. And I think it will be a really useful tool for our community.
Okay, so welcome to Long COVID the Answers. But anyway, yeah, so this is our homepage. And what I'm going to do is I'll run through some of the key features on the website and scroll down the homepage. So I know this is quite busy, and a third of you have sensory impairment who suffer from long COVID. So we've developed, unfortunately, our dark mode is broken, and but we are in the process of getting it repaired. We don't have $50,000 to pay for a developer, so it's taking us a bit of time to sort that, but we will get that back online. But we added something to the website, and it's somehow broken the dark mode. And Joe, who built this website from a $30 pack, tells me it's like finding a needle in a haystack. So she's busy trying to sort that. So that will come back. But in the meanwhile, we have a low stimulus version where you can just go, there's just a body. and then you can click on the body to find out certain symptoms. So if you click on the head, then all the symptoms to do with the brain and spinal cord, i.e. the neurological system, are listed, and you can go into each that way. So, I mean, the key thing is that you guys have over 200 symptoms, as you know, and what we've tried to do is to provide. So if I click on POTS, so what we've tried to do is to list what the symptoms are. So what the symptoms are, what it is, what the typical symptoms are, who gets it, key points about the symptoms, and then relief. So each of these gets medically reviewed by me. As you know, there are over 200 symptoms, and a page like this takes 4 hours for me to do. So what I've done so far is I've probably done the first 15 to 20 most popular by hand. We do have an AI that has done the rest, but AIs just give you a very simplified version of what the symptoms are. So I'm slowly going through and changing, and rewriting them. But the AIs will give you a safe sort of breakdown of what's what. And then the way we make money is by affiliate advertising. So if you visit the site and you want to buy some leggings, because as you know, with some of you may know that one of the key ways of managing POTS is with compression stockings or leggings, increasing your sort. You need to keep an eye on your blood pressure. So if you click on this and go to this page and buy something, we get a small amount of money that will go towards the upkeep of the site, and that's what we'll keep it free. So yeah, so that gives you a breakdown of how each of the symptoms are organized on the website. So if I scroll down, so at the top, what you get is the top 10 most common symptoms are always scrolling. And then we intercept those with breaking news. And also we advertise our Ask the Expert section, which I'll get to in a minute, and also the latest episode of the podcast series. So if I click on Ask the Expert, so this month, so what we do is on social media, we have an expert every month. So at the moment we're going through our advisory board, and Todd is on our advisory board. So we've got quite esteemed people on our advisory board. I'll quickly explain them and then I'll go back to Ask the Expert. So Kaylee is a long hauler, and she's doing her MSc in long COVID, and she does a lot of long COVID research at SFU, which is a university in BC. Professor Thedithan is one of the few psychiatrists in the long COVID world that runs a complex chronic diseases clinic in Colorado. Dr. Daniel Griffin, you might have heard of, he's an infectious disease specialist. He's one of the medics I most admire, actually. He's been at the forefront of the pandemic since the very beginning. He has people in ICU, in the hospital. He runs an outpatient clinic for long haulers. He's a broadcaster, and he has a podcast called TWIV, which is mostly about COVID, and he has a section all about long COVID. He's fantastic. He's on our advisory board. He did the July Ask the Expert. Todd Davenport is the co-chief educator and long COVID physio. He has, I think, up to 20 years of expertise on complex chronic disease, and or is it 12 years, and worked extensively with ME/CFS and now long COVID. Professor James Jackson wrote a really great book called Clearing the Fog. He's a neuropsychologist, and he's runs a complex chronic diseases clinic at Vanderbilt University in Nashville. He's pretty well known in the long COVID world. Anna Goodmanson runs the Sensate app. She's an entrepreneur, and she kind of gives us advice as a small startup. Shamir is a long hauler. She was an award-winning elementary school teacher who had to retire due to long COVID. She's had quite severe long COVID, and so now she's become an advocate for long haulers, particularly those in the BIPOC space. Dr. Danilo Bonsenzo is a wonderful gentleman. You know, he's a pediatrician. If you had a kid that was sick, you'd want him to be looked after. He's one of the few pediatricians in the world that really does masses of research on long COVID in children and tries to bring that up to light, because it's something that's hugely missed. Children only make up something like 0.02% of long haulers, but when you look at 400 million, the denominator is huge. So, you know, millions of children have long COVID all over the world and they don't have a voice, and he's a voice for them. He runs a long COVID clinic in Rome. He's fantastic. Professor Arsenault, I've mentioned, he's a top person, one of the top persons in Canada on complex chronic disease, and ran the complex chronic diseases women's unit for many years in Vancouver, and now is the only long COVID physician that we have in the whole of BC to serve a population of 5 million. He's a real trooper. And Rosemary is my mother-in-law. She's wonderful. So she's our non-long hauler, non-medical sort of ears and eyes. She's a retired EA. She helps put the transcripts together, but she also gives us that perspective of not being sick and of, you know, being ordinary. So those are all our advisors. So all our clinical providers, all our clinical advisors at the moment are the experts of the month. So as I said, Daniel's July, Todd is August, James will be September, Theda will be October, November will probably, I can't remember who's November, and then December will be Danilo. You'd think it was Rick. It might be Rick that's November. So anyway, so if I get back to the home page, so the Ask the Expert really is about, let me just scroll to it. It's going to come up in a minute, or I can just, let me see. Where is it here? Yeah. So what we do is Todd last month, his special interest is post-exertional malaise. So we did a call out, obviously on the website. You can come onto the website and send in a form. So Jim is next month. So when it was Todd, you put your name down, say what you're about, and then ask your question. And then we extract about 8 to 10 questions and send them to the expert the week before they're posted. And we say, if you could please just answer a minimum of 4, because they're incredibly busy. And so what they do is they pick the best 4 that they can give a general answer to that benefits everybody. So we know that you don't have, most of you don't have physicians that are working with you to help you with your disease. You've helped yourselves, really. We know that from the Facebook and other support groups. And if you are on a list for a complex chronic diseases clinic, it's a long wait. And even before we launched, we were getting, you know, emails of, can you please help me? Do you know of anybody in my area that can help me? So this is our way of trying to do that. They can't give personal medical advice, but they're answering, you know, people's questions in the community. And he decided to answer all 8 because he thought they were all brilliant. So we were really pleased with that. So please do send in your questions to Jim. You can go to the website and fill out the form, or you can go to our Facebook page or our LinkedIn page, whatever, and ask a question on there and we'll pick it up. So getting back to the homepage, I'm just going to scroll down. So yeah, and what we try and do with the breaking news bit is try and highlight something that's happened recently in the long COVID space, and a bit of latest research, or something in the news. So I know at the moment Joe's working on posting. She took down last week's breaking news and she's in the process of posting the breaking news about how you know, there's 400 million people suffering from COVID, and I think it's causing, was that the one, $1 trillion a year, something like that. And then also the breaking news about how long COVID cost the Australian government I think it's 10 billion. So anyway, I sent her the breaking news articles and she's going to be posting those up. But as I say, the top symptoms and this week's podcast episode, and the Ask the Expert scrolls across on there. Then there's an introduction from me. And so what we're trying to do here is we're trying to create a global directory of long COVID clinics and also long COVID practitioners. And what we hope is to have a good list of clinics and practitioners in every continent of the globe, so that you can come to the website, put in your postcode, your country, your area, and see who is it in your space that provides, you know, long help for you. So that this is something, when we did our market research, that people really wanted. Where is there someone in my area that can help me? Where is a clinic that I can join, where I can get help? So we're busy trying to you know, collect that information, and we hope to open up the directory in the fall. Well, it's going to be in the winter, really, probably sometime between October and December. It will take time for us to build that, but we're in the process of doing that. So that's what that's about. This is the podcast series that I talked about. So I've interviewed, as I said, Michelle Harkin. She's brilliant. She appeared on the Help Senate Committee hearing in January. She was an ICU doctor, and from her experience there, obviously the people that were discharged, about 70 to 80% of them suffered from long COVID. So she opened a clinic and then discovered that the majority, I think, of her patients came from the community. So she regularly educates her healthcare professionals in New Mexico about long COVID through the ECHO teaching program. And she, you know, we needed somebody that could give a podcast. You're a busy GP. How do you approach someone that comes into your office with loads and loads of symptoms in a 10-minute consultation? How would you approach that? Where do you start? So that's what that episode is about. And then there's, you know, all sorts of interviews. So we've got a few personal accounts from Gez Medinger. I'm sure you all know about. He's a brilliant advocate for long haulers, being a long hauler himself. He has a brilliant channel. So we interviewed him. We interviewed Danny Ortman for the first 2 episodes. He talked about long COVID. So as you can see, we're interviewing all these people and hoping to educate you, your carers, your family, and make it listener friendly. Transcripts are included. The podcast is also available on YouTube, and all the podcast channels like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and also Amazon and loads of others. But if you want to get the main pro credits, if you're a healthcare professional, you have to come to the site because there's a whole process. You have to watch the video all the way through. You can't skip it or fast forward it. And then at the end of it, there's a quiz for you. You have to answer some questions and reflect on what you've learned. And then once you've completed that, we post you a certificate with your credits. And if you're in Canada, those credits are automatically updated to the CFPC website twice a year. And if you're an international healthcare professional, you have the certificate, so you can show to your licensing body that you've learned about long COVID. So in that way, we're trying to educate doctors and other healthcare professionals. Then as you scroll down, you can see quick links to common symptoms. What we've tried to do with the symptoms is make it easy for people who are non-medical. So, you know, sometimes people might be saying, oh, I'm dizzy, I've got long COVID. What does that mean? So you just type in dizzy, and then every article that comes up, we've tried to make it an intelligent search engine. Because I often find when I go into websites, I find that Google search engine is better than the actual website search engine. So I said to Jo, I don't want that. So she had a lot to do on a $30 kit, but she's done it. She's amazing. So yeah, you type in dizzy, and all the things about all the symptoms that have anything to do with dizziness come up on the website. Please forgive us if there's things like coming soon. There's only 2 of us doing this, and we both hold down jobs because we've got bills to pay, and Jo has little children. So I don't have a day off now. I work 7 days a week. And so does Jo. I do 2 clinic days, and the rest of my time I'm doing this. So we will get to things, and hopefully as the as the website starts to make some form of funds, we can hire in doctors. I need a team of doctors to work on the symptoms with me, for example. But yeah, please be patient with us, but there's a lot there anyway, you'll find. And we do like feedback from you. At the bottom of the website are our contact emails. If you can see ways that we can improve the website or things that you want, then please deliver constructive criticism. You know, we're a very open team, and we want, this is for you and for people that we want to help you and other long callers. So if there's anything here that you would like to see that isn't, then please let us know. So scrolling down, we've also featured COVID-19, the answers, which the first podcast series I told you about, which talks all about how to keep yourself safe from SARS-CoV-2. Then I've also put in newsletters and Substacks that I really admire. So the Sick Times is amazing. Most of you have probably heard of it, run by a long hauler and a journalist that's covered COVID from the very beginning. They feature all the latest research and news all over the world about long COVID. It's a fantastic publication. So we've put it on, and we're working with them. I've got an interview coming out with the Sick Times in a few weeks. So yeah, they're fantastic. And then we also have this Substack called Long COVID Weekly, run by two people suffering from long COVID, two long haulers who are amazing. So what they go through is they go through all of the there's many scientific articles that seem to me like it's all of them, because I keep myself updated by looking at their Substack feed, and they summarize them and then provide a link to the article. So if you're busy person, you don't have time, or you're feeling sensory impaired, and you just want a summary of what's going on, you can read their summaries. Or if you're a busy doctor, you don't have time to read the whole article, then you can just go and look at the summary. And if it interests you, then you can go on a link to the website. So that's brilliant. I thought that was a brilliant resource. So we've put that on the home page. And then we have a news section. And what I've done is found all the news feeds that I like, that give regular, reliable evidence. I'm happy to hear of any more if you know of them. And so I subscribe to them first, make sure that they're not selling snake oil or talking nonsense. And then if they're really cool, we put their RS feed on the site so you can keep up to date with what's going on. And then scrolling down, we have again a few key features and recent posts, recent breaking news posts that we've had over the past few weeks. We've only been live for about 4 weeks, so there's not many at the moment. And then you've reached to the end of the website. Please subscribe to our newsletter. You'll get lots of information and tips and stuff of what we're doing. We've got, you know, we've still got another 11 podcasts to record. I start recording again in mid-October. And so again, if you have any ideas of any topic that we haven't touched on that you'd like to hear about, because at the moment I'm booking people to interview, I can safely say I've managed to book the patient research collective to be interviewed for the fall. And so I've got some others that I'm lining up. So please feed back to us, you know, if there's anybody that you'd like to see. So going back to the top of the website, other key bits. So we've tried to be inclusive. Again, we're looking, there's very little information about LGBTQ plus people's experiences of long COVID. There seems to be hardly any research published, hardly any accounts. We would like to have a section on that. I've not had any success in finding anybody who knows anything about that. So if anybody does, please send them our way. But we've tried to be inclusive. We've got a carers page, which does need building. We've listed all the Black and Indigenous research I could find. There's not very much on the website. And then any research that's been done on low and middle income countries has been listed here. Yeah. This is a really important section, diagnosis and management. So what this talks about is how to prepare yourself for a long COVID assessment. Going to see a primary care physician is daunting. Daunting if you don't have long COVID. It takes a lot of courage. That's why I wasn't prepared to just spend 10 minutes with people. It takes a lot of courage for people to come in and see their doctor and talk about what's going on. And so, for me, that deserves time. I don't have kids. A lot of my colleagues do. So, and they've got much more outgoings. So I can understand they're forced to work in that environment. They're not properly recompensed. So they have to pile them up and see them quick, but it just doesn't work for me. But that's the reality. We all live in this situation where the doctor, the primary care physician really on average only has 7 to 10 minutes to talk to you. So this is about how you prepare for that consultation. And one thing is you have to teach us that this isn't going to be a 10-minute thing. This is going to be something where I'm going to need to come back to you several times for me to have my symptoms sorted. So it's about you understanding that situation and then understanding that situation and how to be prepared. And what really inspired this section was the long COVID handbook. Reading that really opened up my eyes to what was going on from the patient and the doctor's perspective, and how to make sense of long COVID. Because initially I felt overwhelmed, how do I approach this? Over 200 symptoms, and so, this has been inspired by that. So we've drawn on that resource, and we've drawn on people like Rick Arsenault and others. And so this kind of tells you, so go to this section, send your family physician who's gaslighting you to this section and get them to learn, how to talk to you. So that's from the long haulers perspective. And then we've also got a section on how the doctor approaches you when you come into the office. So someone comes in, you've got 10 minutes, you're running probably 30 minutes late, patients are puffing and blowing and complaining, and the receptionist is ringing through to you saying, what's going on? I've got people out here complaining, you're running 30 minutes late. And then someone walks into your office and your heart sinks when it's complex because so that's the situation the position's in. So it's like, calm yourself. This is the way you approach it. So we've written that for them. So we've printed this guide from Trish Greenho, the BMJ, and it's a fantastic chart. And when you're busy, you just want something that you look at quickly and know what to do before the patient comes through the door. And so she's circled here the red flag symptoms that you need to exclude, and then what you need to concentrate on, the most common things that long haulers have. And there's very little tests that you need to do as a physician to diagnose long COVID. It's all in the history. It's all about listening to you guys and giving you the time to tell your story. I'm just switching off my phone. Apologies for that. To tell your story. So this is what this section is about. So we've included this for doctors. So and you can explore the rest of it. And obviously we've got an explanation of what long COVID is, etc. So this is a key thing, symptoms and relief. So this is all the 200 symptoms listed in here, breathing, God, every time I write a symptom, I love doing it. I learn masses. There's no textbook about long COVID. The reason why it takes me 4 to 8 hours to write one of these pages is I have to look through loads of papers, and lots of information has been published that's contradictory. So I have to find, what is common amongst them, and so that I can write it and then write it in a way that's understandable to a non-medical person as well as a medical person. So that's why I have people like Rosemary and Joe reading through it. It's like, what does that mean for me? Because you forget that you're using medical terminology. So that's why it takes so long to write. So yeah, so as I said before, in each of the symptoms, you'll have an explanation of who it is, key points, and relief, and where to find it. And then we did the body so that, you can just point to different parts of the body.
Pardon the interruption, but there's a lot of questions in the chat about how to tell the parts that are reviewed by you and the parts that are still just the straight AI basics. Is that what that medically reviewed check mark is
That's
at the
what
top of the
that's what
article?
medic that's what medically reviewed is. Though actually I've medically reviewed diagnosis and management, but I haven't so for example, this has got, I think, has it got medically reviewed on it? Yeah. So this has got 2 stars. I've done this, so really I need to put a medically reviewed on it. But the reason why it's still got 2 stars is because it means I have to look through it again. It's been posted, and then I'll put because I wrote it all up and then it was posted on by Joe. And so then I need to read through it again to make sure that there's no errors, and then I'll put medically reviewed. And some of them I've medically reviewed, like the breathing, and we haven't put the stamp yet. But yeah, the ones that, the ones that have asterisks on them are the ones that what was I say? Are the ones, so I need to take that asterisk off, because the one that has 2 asterisks, the ones that have 2 asterisks on that have been written by AI, generally speaking, though I did write this, so I need to take the asterisks off, and I'll do that after this. And then you'll see the medically reviewed stamp. That's definitely been reviewed by me. But the AI is kosher. We've tested we use several different AI programs, and we've tested it, and I've seen what it does. And so it has my approval. So all of them have my approval, but they've not all been formally medically reviewed. You'll find that the most common ones, by and large, have been medically reviewed, and you'll start to see that tick more and more as I go through the symptoms. But they're nearly all reliable. And if you find something that you feel, oh, that's not quite right, because I had somebody point out to me few weeks ago with the anxiety page. They says, oh, on the anxiety page, I think that was written by the AI, because it says something about exercise, and it didn't have the flag about you can't exercise if you're suffering from PEM. And so I had looked at that, but I hadn't removed that line. And so I must have been tired and 1 o'clock in the morning, and she found it, and so I removed it. So if you find anything that you think doesn't look quite right, then just send us an email, let us know, and we'll be on it and we'll sort it. But yes, largely speaking, the ones where it says medically reviewed have been written by me. And if they have an asterisk and they've been medically reviewed, they've been reassessed again by me, but still need to be rewritten. But most of them, as I say, are reliable.
So
So
that
here,
this website, guys, is it's really new. I think you've been up maybe what, like a month?
yeah.
Yeah, and so it's a work in progress. You're sort of getting a sneak peek behind the scenes as they work through some of these issues. And so definitely we hear your concerns about AI. And if you look for that medically reviewed stamp as Dr. Olanola goes through, then you'll know the parts that she's checked and actually made sure that all of the details are in there.
Yeah, and I'm being, I really need a team of at least 5 doctors to write over 200 symptoms, because as I said, each symptom takes about 4 hours to write. There is no textbook for long COVID. The medical profession doesn't even recognize it properly yet. So I have to draw on all of the reliable information out there to compose something that's readable. So I'm being honest with you. Somebody would turn around and say, well, how did you get to write 200 symptoms and this one doesn't look quite right? So I'm being upfront and honest. We have employed an AI to do a lot of them. We will go through and rewrite them to be more detailed, and more explanatory. And we've picked up better AIs that are now better AI systems that are able to write them temporarily better. But it's nowhere near as good as what I can do. But there's only so many hours in the day. We're now, before we launched, we were doing the work of 8 people. We're now doing the work of 20 people between the two of us. So, please have some understanding. We will, meet all of your needs. They will all be eventually rewritten. And the more you tell people about the site and the more traffic that gets to the site, the more money we can raise. And then I can hire doctors to help me do what I do. So it all comes in a roundabout. But by and large, most of what nearly everything that's on the page is reliable. But it's like with anything, you watch a movie and you have these buffs that see, oh yeah, they in halfway through the scene, this corner of a skirt wasn't the same color. They'll pick up something like that. So that's the kind of situation we're in. Show us, and then we'll correct it if you see a mistake.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I think the
then,
asterisks, they're asking for clarification. So my understanding was if it says medically reviewed and has a check mark, it's been completely, vetted and rewritten and sourced. If it has asterisks, the first pass has gone through to check everything, but then it needs the final edit. So there may still be some typos or some, punctuation things or some additions that need to be made. So if you're seeing the asterisks, you're seeing the draft version. If you're seeing the medically reviewed, you're seeing that the final version. If there's nothing on it yet, that's probably the AI generation. Just to be clear.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well, our rule is if it has two asterisks and it's not been medically reviewed, that means it's AI. But I've made a mistake here. I forgot to remove the two asterisks and put medically reviewed because I actually wrote this. But by and large, if it's like this with two asterisks and no medically reviewed, it's probably AI. And needs to be rewritten. Sometimes you'll see one asterisk and medically reviewed, which means I've looked through it. I'm happy with the basics, but I'm going to go back and rewrite it. But it's been properly medically reviewed. And then if you see medically reviewed, it's been completely rewritten by me. And it's done. Though I can't say that it's done because, at some point I'm going to rewrite the POTS because I've learned more about it. As we get more and more research in. I mean, long COVID is now the most researched disease on the planet. So as we get more and more research in about the disease, I'll have to even rewrite the ones that I've medically reviewed. But we're starting off with the most common symptoms and then moving on to the less common and working our way through.
Right.
Um,
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say we're about at our hour mark, and this is normally where Q&A starts. Did you have a few more things you wanted to show before we started with the Q&A?
Yeah, just showing that there's a kids section here, really trying to highlight that kids suffer from long COVID. So whenever I do a symptom, I try and include a children's section where the research has been done. It's not so comprehensive and we're building a kids part. And then, this is the certified CPD section. So, to know that whoever comes in here is credible. People fill out their licensing information and they can get on and watch through the podcast, but we don't give them their points until we've checked out their license, that they are, credible. And also it's a good place where we collect, people that work in the long COVID space to build the directory. So yeah, that's more or less. So questions away. Yeah, I'll ask away.
Right. Well, I'm just going to switch gears for a second as we go through and start asking a little bit about symptoms. Now, everyone needs to remember that Dr. Okunola cannot provide your personal medical advice because she is not your personal physician, but she can answer general questions about symptoms to the best of her ability, or maybe even show us, through the website how you would look for things. So the first questions are, I guess, your thoughts off the cuff about hyperPOTS management.
About hyperPOTS management.
Yeah,
Sorry,
like
about POTS management.
yeah, I think adrenogenic POTS is what they're referring. Do you have specific thoughts about that management?
Um, so I'm not entirely sure. I know how to manage POTS generally. I'm a family physician. So if we're going to go into how to manage specific aspects of POTS, that isn't my forte. So what we've got on the website is a general information on how to manage POTS generally, and where to go to get help. So how to diagnose POTS, for example, with the Nasaline test, which you should do. You can do at home, but you need to be accompanied because you can faint. And the general way of managing POTS, most people are managed very well by with an increased fluid intake and an increased salt intake. You can also manage it with medication, but that would need to be under the guise of a physician, either a physician who has experience with managing complex chronic disease, or a cardiologist that has experience of managing POTS, and they can prescribe certain medications to help. But I've spoken to so quite a few complex chronic disease physicians, and what they say is most POTS can be managed by managing salt intake and fluid intake. In terms of hypoadrenergic POTS, if it's different from that, I don't have specific expertise on that. That would need to come from someone who has experience with managing that.
All right. What about new onset seizures?
So what you would need to do, if somebody presented to you with new onset seizures, obviously, as I said, it's all in the history. You need to actually clarify that it's seizures. I mean, you would want to know that it was definitely something associated with a SARS-CoV-2 infection. And depending on the age of the individual, you'd want to exclude any form of spatial occupying lesion. So, for example, if you've got somebody sitting in front of you who's an adult with new onset seizures, and you establish that that was, highly likely from the medical history and possibly your neurological examination, the first thing I'd want to do would be to exclude a brain tumor, or what we call in medical terms a space occupying lesion, which could be a tumor, or parasitic infection if you're JFK, or a stroke. You'd want to do blood work to make sure that there wasn't any metabolic issue. If after ruling all of that out, and the specialist, if you had new onset seizures, you'd refer the person to a neurologist. If you strongly suspected it was associated with a SARS-CoV-2 infection, you would hope that you'd be able to refer them to a neurologist who actually understands how to manage somebody who has post-acute sequelae of COVID or long COVID who's developed seizures. They're quite hard to find in actual fact, unless they're attached to a complex chronic diseases clinic. And then they would be managed depending on, well, they'd be given medication to manage their seizures, and they would be managed by a specialist, really. That's not something that we would manage in community health. So somebody came in to me as a primary care doctor, which is what I am. I'm not a neurologist, with new onset seizures. I would probably refer them that day to the hospital for those types of investigations.
And then we have several symptom questions. I'm going to sort of limit people maybe to one or two on themselves, but this one's a really good one. Have you heard of long COVID affecting women's menstruation, in particular excessive bleeding and irregularity? And are there any ways that can help alleviate this?
So there's a lot, yes, I have. There's a lot of research going into that at the moment as to why that's happening. I know Danny Altman is doing a study in London. He's a quite well-known immunologist in the long COVID space. And I think there's a couple of other people. I can't remember who else is doing research. We don't know why. People who didn't develop long COVID but got a SARS-CoV-2 infection, women who got a SARS-CoV-2 infection, noticed that there was irregularity in their periods. And I think some women that received the vaccine noticed, a small group of women noted that their periods became different or irregular. I suspect it's something to do with the spike protein, since the vaccine was developed from the spike protein, and obviously the spike protein is on the SARS-CoV-2 virus. At the moment, we don't have any treatments or cures for long COVID. We don't totally understand why it's happening. So what we do is symptom relief. So if somebody came to me and they were having heavier periods, then I would prescribe something like tranexamic acid. If they were heavy or painful, I'd prescribe mefenamic acid. If they became irregular, I might put them on the contraceptive pill if it was safe, to regulate their periods or stop their periods altogether. So I would use all of the tools that I have now to manage those periods. So once we have some idea of how the virus causes that, then we'll be able to give something, hopefully, that either cures that or treats it and targets whatever it is that's causing it. But for the moment, all we can do is manage the symptoms with the medication that we have.
Another topic, and you spoke briefly about this earlier when you were talking about the anxiety page, but the exercise and reconditioning, especially with the high, given the cardiac worries and the high number of people with sudden collapses. What are your thoughts on, and we get this a lot in our groups too, people saying, you know, I've had COVID. Maybe they're pretty close in proximity to their acute infection. They don't know yet if they're going to be a long hauler or not. But you know, what would be the best way to assume activity after a COVID infection to try to avoid long COVID? And then once you have it, can you just speak a little bit about how you're getting the word out to the physicians and what's your general stance on the exercise and reconditioning post-COVID?
Okay, so yeah, this is a very hot topic at the moment. So let me state that it is dangerous if you have post-exertional malaise or extreme fatigue to exercise. I mean, there's just been so much research now out there to say, I mean, I can't remember the name of the paper, but there's a famous paper that came out at the beginning of this year. It's on the website somewhere. Talk about it in my interview with Todd, where the researchers showed that there was muscle cell necrosis, i.e. muscle cell death with exercising long haulers. It is dangerous to exercise if you have post-exertional malaise. You need to work with a physiotherapist and an occupational therapist who has experience of working with people with complex chronic disease, i.e. long COVID, ME/CFS, fibromyalgia, who knows how to pace and teach you how to pace and gradually increase activity in your schedule. It could take you a year to build up to doing a walk, you know. It is not, you know, exercise and reconditioning is not a cure for post-exertional malaise or fatigue in long COVID. So I'm categorically saying that now. So in terms of when you catch the virus, not knowing whether you're going to develop long COVID or not, listen to your body. You know, your body tells you what you can and cannot do. Even prior to SARS-CoV-2, we all know, or we did know as doctors, and most people know that when you get something like the flu, you not only do you feel sick when you know, with the cold, the sore throat, the runny nose, taken to bed, feeling run down, for 2-3 weeks after, you can feel run down because your body's used all its energy to fight the infection. So if you go and do a gym workout when you've just recovered from the flu, it's not good for you. You need to gradually reintroduce exercise. And I would always tell my patients that anyway. And you have to be even more cautious when you get a SARS-CoV-2 infection, because you don't know which 20% of you are going to get it. 20% is a big number. 1 in 5 people who get a SARS-CoV-2 infection are going to develop long COVID. And of that 20% group, only 50 to 60% will get recovery enough to go back to work. 40% will have a life change and never fully recover. So that's why we continuously have 5 to 10% of people in the population with long-term long COVID. So with long COVID as a risk, you really want to listen to your body. If it's looking like you're developing signs and symptoms of long COVID, you need to see your doctor, get a formal diagnosis. If he doesn't believe in long COVID, refer him to the website and then go back, and then he will believe you and stop gaslighting you, I hope. And if he doesn't, after looking at the website, I want to know so that I can improve it so that he or she does. And then you can work with that person, because there's information on the website about pacing, or there's, you know, long COVID physio does a fantastic, you know, it's got a fantastic page about pacing and what to do and whatever. And you can work through with her on how to look after yourself and your body and get yourself back to function. If you're lucky enough to be able to get a referral to a complex chronic diseases clinic or long COVID clinic, there's a whole team of people that will work with you to get you functioning again. And really, if you're suffering from long COVID, it's about being able to do simple things like get up in the morning and brush your teeth, in the very beginning, if you're at the more severe end, and working on from that. And you have to work with your occupational therapist, your physiotherapist, your primary care provider, your specialist physician on creating a schedule that's unique to you, because one long hauler is the same. So yeah, that's my response to that. So I hope that answers that question.
That's great. And I saw that episode 6, I believe, on the podcast was actually addressing that very question as well. So people can go and listen to episode 6 on the podcast about that very topic. I know you spoke a little bit about this, and I have a suspicion that I know the answer, but someone is asking, how is your website currently funded? How are you paying for the hosting, domain names, etc.?
Me, I'm doing it.
That's what I thought.
So yeah, I work for the podcast. I go without food for the website. Yeah, it's me. I'm obviously not going without enough food because I'm a bit overweight at the moment, but the way things are going, because now that we're launched, it's getting even more expensive. I'll probably lose weight that way. So yeah, it's me and Joe. We work for nothing. That's how passionate and strongly we feel about this. I am worried. I I am heartbroken. Every story I hear, I'm heartbroken about, and I want to do something, and I'm frightened for humanity. I'm seriously concerned that, our future generations will look back and say human beings could once do all these wonderful things, but now we're chronically sick. I think there's a real danger of that. As I said, we know that there's 400 million long haulers out there. We don't know how many people are suffering from organ and tissue damage from SARS-CoV-2 infections. I'm petrified when I hear that people are getting 7 infections and 10 times infected by SARS-CoV-2. It's frightening. So I feel passionately. What we aim to do is generate an income from affiliate advertising. We're slowly building up all the symptom pages. We will run some paid for webinars that go into, so post-exertional malaise, there's an episode all about it, and Todd gives an excellent overview of what it's about and how to manage it. But we're hoping to run workshops where we go into depth about that sort of thing so that people can learn, and we'll charge a small amount for that because we have to, otherwise we're going to go under. So but we're going to try and keep the cost down. If we get enough people that come on board, we'll charge $20, $10 per webinar so that it's affordable, because we realize that you're all impoverished. So and then also with the directory, it's going to be comprehensive. We're going to list all of the clinics that we find out about them, as we're finding out about them across the world, but we'll also list private clinics. So if you guys learn about the clinic through our website and they get a consultation through our website, then we'll charge them a small amount. And so that will come in the future. So we're trying to make it self-sustaining, so that we don't load the costs of the website and the services that we provide on you lot. The website will always be free. The podcast will always be free. We want knowledge to be free. We looked into becoming a charity. We looked into government funding. There's so many hoops, and so many committees you have to go through to get any money. It's like, God, we'd be like 80 before we even got it off the ground. So we just ditched that. And the websites that we saw that were reliant on charitable and government funding, when the funding ran out, the website stopped. So at the moment, we feel really passionately. We know people with long COVID that are close to us, that are suffering. We want to do something. So we've just, it's our money, that has made this
So like
happen.
Yeah, so like so many of these kind of grassroots efforts that start with concerned individuals that look at a problem and say, you know, I want to do something about this. I want to try to solve the problem. The website is built by people who actually really care about getting the information out to the public. And hopefully, if we, the public, can support their, you know, their efforts by trafficking the site, by telling other people about it, then they can realize their goals of providing more services and more information to us. So it's a two-way. If it's a two-way street, if you want to see the information grow, then let's tell other people about it. Let's support the site, and then we'll have teams working on the site to compile the information, and it'll be a self-perpetuating thing.
Exactly. Thank you, Cara. Very well said.
Okay, so why isn't there more focus on the prevention of long COVID, especially by avoiding infection, even from long COVID specialists? Someone says, like Dr. Griffin, many long COVID clinics don't require masks or have providers that mask.
Yeah, I agree. We've got a prevention page here that needs building. I feel passionately about that. So I mean that's what long if I go back to it, so we do have a prevention page talking about prevention. So all of, COVID-19, the answers is all about preventing SARS-CoV-2. That's what I started with. So if you go, click onto this, go to the website, you can read about all the mitigating factors that are out there about how to prevent yourself from getting SARS-CoV-2. You can also hear about success stories like the University of Arizona and the University of Colorado, which Jose Jimenez both are a part of. So they implemented everything. Universities are little towns really of 60,000 students on average. They brought in rapid testing. They did widespread vaccination. They did wastewater monitoring. They put air filtration and ventilations in every classroom. And where they couldn't fit that, they taught about open windows and CO2. They talk about it, and they drove down the number of infections, and on campus, even before mass vaccination came out, by introducing all those mitigating factors. I think it's episode 8 where the University of Arizona talks about it, and Jose Jimenez, his colleague, also talks about it as well in the series. So we did that, and in the winter, the new set of interviews that I'm doing, so we've basically got slowly releasing, we've got 20 recorded already. So we've done what is long COVID and the pathophysiology with Danny Ortman, long COVID in children with Danilo. You can listen to all of those. Gaz has talked about his story. Pem with Todd, diagnosing long COVID in primary care with Michelle Harkins, etc., etc. We've got brain fog. Amy Prohl talking about other viral illnesses and chronic disease, psychiatric management, mental health, breathing, cardiovascular. We're also going to have prevention. I want to see a global clean indoor air act. That's what I want to see. That's going to be one of my main campaigns. So I want to try and interview people who feel that way. So I'm looking for people to interview that are involved with that. So that's going to be one of the things. But yeah, we've given you loads of information about prevention. Please go and listen and watch these episodes and spread the word.
So here, I think we all want clean air. uh,
Yeah, I mean, and it makes sense. You know why I think long COVID is going to change the world, apart from the fact that unfortunately it's a horrible illness. The reason why it's going to change the world is we're going to reduce this 17 years between research and effect, because there's just so many people suffering. People will die long before that 17 years is up, and the likes of me and others that feel passionately about that disease will not allow that to happen. We will not have to wait 17 years for something that's been proven in research to be effective in clinical practice. We're going to change that. It's a disease that needs a multidisciplinary team to look after you. You don't just need a doctor, you need occupational therapists, physiotherapists, neuropsychologists, you need social workers to help with your disability benefits, you need counselors, and so on and so on. let me tell you that at least a fifth of my patients have complex chronic disease, whether it be an elderly person with about 5 different pathologies, diabetes, heart failure, poor housing. You know, they need all of the healthcare professionals that you need that are not in primary care. It all falls on the primary care physician. That's why you struggle to find them, because we're overwhelmed. Well, you know what? They're going to have to provide them, because there's 400 million people that need them, and that will help everybody else. So the way you make people listen to your fight and listen to what needs to be heard is say, your grandmum needs an occupational therapist too. She can't get around in her home because she doesn't have a guardrail to help her get into the bath. And I need an occupational therapist to help me with my cognitive impairment. If it comes into our clinic, your grandmum's going to gain and I'm going to gain. Your kid that's suffering from leukemia, you have to take a year off work. How are you going to pay your bills? You need a social worker in the clinic that can help you with that. I need a social worker to help with my disability benefit. If you help me, it's going to help you. So that's how the face of medicine is going to change. And we're going to introduce complex chronic disease in every faculty. That's what I want, you know, and that's what you guys are going to make happen, because you're going to have to be heard because there's so many of you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think this is a good question to close on. I do know that there is, I know, longcovidtheanswers.com. There's a section for contact us or communicate on the website. If you have other questions, I'm sure Dr. Okunola would be happy to answer them if you just submit them for the website. But there are several people asking if there is any way to, make donations or support the site or help with fundraising for the site. I know you really don't want the onus of the site funding to be on the patients. I know you want to use, affiliates and let businesses pay instead of the individual. But if someone were to want to, donate or organize a fundraiser, is there a mechanism in place for that?
We will set one up if that's what you want. I mean, as Cara said, I've been loath to do that because you guys are impoverished. You know, I know that you're out of work, you're unable to work as well as you have. You know, I'm aghast when I see these courses charging $200 an hour to help you. It's like, oh my God, you know, where they're going to find that. So somebody suggested to me the other day, why don't you just put a donate button on there? So if people want to, they can do it. So now that you've asked for it, I'll talk to Joe. We'll do that. And also when we run out, we're going to run a pilot series of webinars in November, probably. Please join them. We will have to charge for that because they're going to be in-depth webinars, but we will keep the charge minimal, and we'll do things like if you pay for all 5, you'll get a discount and stuff like that. So do join those. That will help. And if they're successful, we will run many. So that's another way. But really, the biggest way is traffic and getting the word out there. Tell everybody that we're out, that we're here. Come to the website, use it. Those people that are gaslighting you, long COVID the answers. Google it. Go to the website, learn about long COVID, and then I'm coming to you next week and I expect answers. You know, just drive people to the site. Go to our our TikTok thing is quite popular right here. Go to that, go to our Instagram, don't go to our Facebook, read, come to the site. That all helps us.
Great. And together we change the future, right?
Totally. We're doing this together. We're working in partnership with all of you. You know, this is for you. You know, I want to see treatments and hopefully a cure for this horrendous disease. I want people to stop being infected. I want the world to be fighting to get a KN95, not trying to pass laws to ban it. I want a global indoor clean air act. It's our right. Do you know the University of Colorado, when they put out their air filtration systems and ventilation systems, when there was a forest fire there, the university campus was the only place where they could get clean air. We need it not just to stop people from getting SARS-CoV-2, we need it for the climate change disaster that we've created to come and all the other diseases that are out there. So, you know, this is a global fight in the truest sense of the word, and we have the power to make long COVID the focus of making real meaningful change that will affect everybody in a positive fashion.
Thank you so much for being with us and sharing your passion and all of the work that you do. And I'm sure we're going to be hearing much more from you in the future.
Well, thank you, everybody. And thank you for inviting me. And, you know, if you ever want me to come back, I'll be happy to do so.